May 8th, the United States carrier group led by the USS George H.W. Bush has locked down the Gulf of Oman. Out of the dozens of idling ships, 2 stand out from the rest as they move slowly but surely towards a nearby Iranian port. These are the Iranian-flagged oil tankers, the MT Sea-Star 3 and MT Sevda, which are both currently in direct violation of the strict rules of the United States' naval blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. It's been more than 3 weeks since that blockade was announced. Every commercial captain traveling through the area knows by now the rules of the strait, as well as the importance of complying with them. And if they don't, US warships are standing by. Destroyers idle on the surface, jets loiter in the clouds above. Every captain in the region knows the threat is very real. But the Sea-Star 3 and the Sevda aren't stopping. They continue toward their destination as an American FA-18 Super Hornet fighter jet circles overhead. The order comes through from the United States Central Command, CENTCOM. The Iranian tankers are to be disabled immediately. Disabled, not destroyed. That's an important distinction. It's not that the US isn't capable of blowing these vessels out of the water or sending them down to the briny depths. But these aren't enemy warships. They're commercial tankers with crew members on board who are simply doing their jobs and following orders from above. The US doesn't need to slaughter civilians or sink ships to send a message, but it cannot allow them to continue. Within minutes, the FA-18 is descending towards the first of the 2 ships, ready to launch a strike with pinpoint precision. The engine room is heavily armoured, so the pilot needs a direct path to the propulsion system without touching the exterior. His target is a 6-foot-wide exhaust pipe. Closing in on his target, the Super Hornet pilot locks his targeting computer and readies his exceptionally accurate laser-guided bomb. The Navy didn't want to take a shot this risky, though. They were forced into it. Exactly 10 weeks earlier, on February 28th, the US and Israel engaged in a direct war with Iran, resulting in the assassination of the country's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. In the days and weeks that followed, much of Iran's military was wiped out, and with few options left on the table, the country resorted to blocking traffic through the Strait of Hormuz, one of the world's most vital waterways, through which 20% of the global oil supply flows. Thousands of ships were subsequently stranded and the price of oil skyrocketed, with the US trying several strategies to break the blockade and open the strait once more. The situation evolved dramatically on April 12th when US Vice President Vance announced that the proposed Pakistan peace talks between the US and Iranian forces had failed, that the 2 sides had not been able to reach an agreement, and that this was bad news for Iran, much more than it's bad news for the US. Later that very same day, President Donald Trump detailed exactly what that bad news entailed for Iran, announcing that US forces were officially seizing control of the Strait of Hormuz. He added that the US would begin destroying the mines that Iran had laid in the strait, and a day later his plan was brought to fruition, with CENTCOM clearly stating that any ships entering or leaving Iranian ports or coastal areas would be stopped, while all other vessels were free to resume their travels to and from any non-Iranian ports in the area. Organising a blockade in a narrow but hugely influential and fiercely contested waterway is no small feat, and the US spared no expense to make this happen. It deployed thousands of troops, hundreds of aircraft, and more than a dozen large warships as well. That sort of force should have been enough to strike fear into the hearts of any captain or commander even entertaining the idea of defying the Americans' orders, but it didn't take long for the first acts of defiance to occur. Despite the immense complexity of establishing and enforcing a blockade in the Strait of Hormuz, the way this actually worked in practice is quite simple. The US monitors the waterways, using its aircraft and naval fleet to look for any ships in violation of the rules. If any ships are spotted, they are issued a warning. Logically, they should then comply with that warning and no further action needs to be taken. That's exactly what happened to begin with US forces intercepting and diverting dozens of vessels, stemming the flow of tens of millions of barrels of Iranian oil. But on April 19th, only a week after Trump's announcement, the blockade's first big test arrived. The MV Touska is seen steaming straight towards the Iranian port city of Bandar Abbas. This is a Panamax-sized container ship with a total tonnage in excess of 66,000 tons and a length of over 960 feet. It's a veritable beast of the seas, capable of transporting enormous amounts of material around the world. Spotting this vast vessel in direct defiance of its blockade, the US begins to follow its established framework. The guided missile destroyer, the USS Spruance, is dispatched to intercept the Touska and issue a clear warning, urging it to cease its journey and reroute right away. It refuses. For 6 hours, the Navy destroyer continued to shadow the Touska, repeatedly blasting out warnings via bridge-to-bridge radio and even firing warning shots across the vessel's bow. Still, the Touska's captain refused to comply, recklessly endangering himself, his crew, and his entire ship. Hours pass, but nothing changes. 6 hours is a long time at sea, and even though cargo ships like the Touska move slowly, they still move, drawing closer and closer to their destination with every passing moment. The US can't afford to wait forever. This standoff cannot be allowed to continue. And so, after 6 tedious hours of back-and-forth communications failing to yield any positive outcome, the order comes through from CENTCOM Commander Admiral Brad Cooper. The Spruance has authority to launch disabling fire at the Touska. On board the Iranian ship, another message comes through from the Americans, but it's not a warning this time. It's an order. Anyone in the Touska's engine room needs to evacuate immediately or risk losing their life. Soon after, the US destroyer opened fire with its 5-inch Mark 45 Mod 4 main gun. The ship executed a highly precise, almost sniper-like strike directly on the Touska's engine room. 9 rounds, that's all it took. 5-inch shells punching directly through the steel hull. They penetrated the engine room's exterior and tore through the ship's propulsion systems. Within seconds, the Touska came to a grinding halt. It had been warned, it had failed to listen, and it had paid the price. Barely half an hour later, US Marines from the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit, MEU, flew over to the ship by helicopter, putting their years of training to good use in a highly efficient fast-rope boarding operation and soon seizing control of the vessel. In one fell swoop, the US has proven that it's ready, willing, and able to enforce its blockade in the most efficient and precise ways possible. Not with bombing runs or missile strikes, but startlingly accurate attacks that cripple even the most colossal cargo ships in the blink of an eye. This is no longer just a mere war of words, but of real, hard-hitting action. The only question left is whether Iran's captain will learn from the example of the Touska or continue in their foolhardy attempts to evade the blockade. The answer arrives quickly. May 6th, Iran hasn't learnt its lesson. In the days since the disabling of the Touska, several more so-called blockade runners have been spotted and stopped. Iran has even resorted to using shadow tanker tactics, deploying cargo ships with disabled transponders and obscured names, hoping that they'll be able to slip through the cracks undetected. But the US is always watching. With eyes in the skies and across the waters, its forces keep tabs on every single ship passing through the Strait of Hormuz. They painstakingly identify every vessel, checking its history, its ownership, its flags, and other details to determine where it came from and where it's headed. And they've just seen another Iranian vessel attempting to sneak by the blockade. This time it's the MT Hasna, an enormous crude oil tanker over 1,000 feet long. She's headed through international waters on the way to another Iranian port on the Gulf of Oman. By now, the Americans know the routine like the back of their hand. A ship is dispatched to intercept the Hasna, and the first warning message is issued. The vessel is told in no uncertain terms that it is in violation of the blockade and must adjust its course or face the consequences. Just like the Touska, the Hasna refuses. More warnings come, but they too fail to produce the desired effect. The Hasna maintains its course, moving ever closer to its destination port. Once more, the US is left with no other option. A US Navy F-A-18 Super Hornet takes off from the USS Abraham Lincoln aircraft carrier and speeds towards the Iranian tanker. The pilot is given the order to disable the vessel. But he doesn't target the engine room, like on the Touska. Instead, he aims at an even smaller target, the rudder, situated behind the tank's propeller. Pulling off this kind of shot demands extraordinary skill, but the US has some of the finest pilots on the planet, the products of some of the most intensive training programs ever invented. Approaching at the perfect angle, lining up his shot just right, the pilot pushes the trigger of his Super Hornet's M61A2 Vulcan 20mm machine gun, firing several rounds straight into the rudder, disabling it instantaneously. The Hasna didn't lose power. Its engine and almost all of its most important components were intact and untouched, while its captain and crew were also unharmed, but the rudder was useless and the ship was disabled. Destroying a rudder on a 1,000-foot tanker creates a massive drifting hazard, though. Without it, the tanker becomes a massive, unguided missile, at risk of drifting dangerously into surrounding commercial traffic or running aground. CENTCOM needed a way to kill a ship from the inside out, forcing it to drop anchor exactly where it stood. Which brings us back to May 8th. The MT Sea Star 3 and MT Sevda continue to follow their course through the Gulf of Oman, zooming in on a nearby Iranian port. Up above, travelling at hundreds of miles an hour, the FA-18 Super Hornet draws nearer. It too is gearing up to launch another astonishing precision strike, not on the rudder nor in the engine room, in the smokestack. These towering structures jut out from the top of these vessels, but if you were to peer down inside them, you'd see all the way down to the engines below, as the stack is technically little more than a massive vertical exhaust pipe. If you could drop a bomb into that pipe, it would fall all the way down to the engines, wiping out important internal components like exhaust valves and cylinders, without having to make a single dent in the ship's hull. Modern-day maritime engines are incredibly sensitive to any sudden changes in pressure, and this impact would instantly trigger the vessel's emergency stop protocols, bringing the ship to a dramatic halt. To pull off a strike like that, you can't just rely on any old bomb. You need one that is powered by some of the world's very best guidance technologies. That's exactly what the Hornet has. It's equipped with GBU-54 laser JDAMs. These were originally dumb 500-pound bombs without any guidance systems to speak of, meaning that pilots had to time their drops to perfection to even have a faint hope of hitting their targets. With the addition of the Joint Direct Attack Munition Kit, though, these dumb bombs become more like missiles, using GPS and inertial navigation systems to strike their targets with near-perfect accuracy and only the most minimal margins of error. The addition of laser guidance enhances their accuracy even further, allowing them to strike moving targets with remarkable reliability. Lining up the shot, the Super Hornet pilot pushes the button. The bomb is dropped and the GBU's own internal navigation systems take over, guiding the explosive towards its target. If the bomb is off target by even a matter of inches, it could strike the ship's superstructure or its deck, causing potentially hundreds of casualties. But that doesn't happen. The bomb goes exactly where it's supposed to go, straight into the smokestack. The blast wave is confined by the steel pipe, so it has nowhere to go but down. 500 pounds of explosives detonate inside a marine diesel engine the size of a 3-story building. Shrapnel shreds the turbochargers, steel drive shafts seize. The main engines choke, the propeller stops, and the ship goes dark. Only minutes after the first Iranian vessel has been disabled, the second suffers the exact same fate. Once more, a laser-guided weapon is dispatched from a Super Hornet. It hones in on its target, the smokestack, and speeds right inside the opening, taking out the ship's propulsion systems from the inside. Minutes ago, these two ships were sailing slowly but inexorably towards their destination, in flagrant violation of the American blockade. Now, plumes of smoke are pouring out of them as their engines fail and their crews rush to the lifeboats. Both vessels are dead in the water, but crucially, they are still afloat. That means no unnecessary loss of life, no humanitarian crises, no massive oil spills or ecological disasters to be concerned about. And that is what the smokestack strike is all about. It's not a question of the US Navy simply showing off its precision weapons or pilot training. It's the ultimate expression of maritime blockade enforcement, the perfectly precise and instantly debilitating strike that can bring oil tankers and cargo ships to their knees without the need for bloodshed or brutality. As of mid-May 2026, CENTCOM reports that the blockade's interceptions and precision strikes have led to over 70 tankers being stopped from entering or leaving Iranian ports. Those same ships have the capacity to transport more than 166 million barrels of oil, worth an estimated $13 billion. The US Navy paralyzed that fleet using $60 million fighter jets. But what if you don't have a navy? When Vladimir Putin hid his $8 billion shadow fleet, Ukraine didn't use jets. They used a $20,000 toy. See exactly how they pulled it off by clicking the video right here. And we'll see you on the next battlefield.